Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. We have discussed unwholesome consciousness, akusala citta, sense sphere beautiful consciousness, kama sobhana citta. And today we are going to learn Ahetuka Citta, that is rootless consciousness. We have changed our order a little bit. There was a question written in last week about the results. After you learning this lesson, it will be clear how results arise. What are the originations of those results? So today we are going to learn rootless consciousness, in Pali, Ahetuka Citta. We have discussed again and again about Hetu in previous classes. In this class, I want to emphasize again what is cause, or what is Hetu, what is root. In Abhidhamma, there are a couple of interpretations for Hetu. Among those interpretations, one is cause, another one is root. In these lessons, we pay attention for the root causes. Kusala hetu, akusala hetu, not the causes. Here, Ahetuka means the consciousness that do not have roots. Therefore, do not misunderstand like the consciousness that arises without causes. That's not the right interpretation. Here, Ahetuka Citta means the consciousness that arises without root causes or without hetu. So we have discussed there are 6 roots: greed, hatred, and delusion in unwholesome akusala, lobha, dosa, and moha. In kusala, non-greed, non-hatred, and non-delusion. Alobha, adosa, and amoha. So Abhidhamma scholars have given interpretations. For example, Sayadaw has given interpretation as unwholesome root for akusala hetu. For wholesome and resultant and functional, good roots. Ikubodhi gave the meaning as bright roots for wholesome, resultant, and functional roots. This is just interpretation for the roots. Later on, we will learn what are the rootless consciousness. There are altogether 18 rootless consciousness. We have classified those 18 rootless consciousness into 3 groups. Unwholesome resultant consciousness, akusala vipaka citta. Rootless, wholesome resultant consciousness, Ahetuka kusala vipaka citta. Third group, rootless, functional consciousness, Ahetuka kiriya citta. If you pay attention for these terms, here I have mentioned just unwholesome resultant. In the second group, I have mentioned rootless. Here highlighted rootless. Also in Pali, Sahetuka. In the third group, also rootless. Now we are going to learn rootless consciousness, but we didn't add the term rootless into unwholesome resultant. What's the reason? Regarding resultant consciousness, there are only unwholesome resultant consciousness. But in the wholesome resultant, there are also rooted as well as rootless. Therefore, we have to differentiate wholesome resultant consciousness, whether they are rootless or rooted. Similarly, regarding functional consciousness, there are rooted functional, you have already learned, as well as rootless functional consciousness. Therefore, when we say wholesome resultant and functional consciousness, we have to add whether they are rooted or rootless. But for unwholesome resultant consciousness, we don't want to add rootless because they are only rootless, unwholesome resultant consciousness. Please pay attention. These chittas are not the unwholesome. Those chittas are resultant of the unwholesome. Therefore, we call unwholesome resultant consciousness. Also, rootless unwholesome resultant means not the wholesome. They are the resultant of vipaka, resultant of wholesome consciousness. So these are not the wholesome or unwholesome. We are called, these are ahetuka. It will be clear, you will learn those chittas in again and again, you practice again and again. Now shall we pay attention to classify those 18 chittas. Before classifying, we pay attention to the bases. In Abhidhamma, there are 6 bases mentioned. They are eye base, ear base, nose base, tongue base, body base, and heart base. When consciousness arises based on these bases. Therefore, we call them as base. Eye base, ear base, nose base, tongue base, body base, and heart base. We give the name for the consciousness based on first 5 bases. But regarding heart base, there are many chittas arise based on heart. Therefore, we call them as manodhatu and manoviññāna dhatu. In Pali, eye means chakku, ear, sota, nose, ghana, tongue, jivha, body, kaya. The consciousness arises based on eye, we call chakku vijnana, eye consciousness. Consciousness that arises based on ear, we call sota vijnana. Consciousness that arises based on nose, we call khana vijnana. Consciousness that arises based on tongue, we call jivha vijnana. Consciousness that arises based on body, we call kaya vijnana. Later on, we will count how many chittas in this Ahetuka, just to get an idea about the consciousness and their basis. Finally, we will count the chittas. Before counting the chittas, we just pay attention what happens in our life. Now we know how greed arises in our mind, how anger arises in our mind, how wholesome natures arise in our mind while we are performing wholesome actions, good deeds, such as offering, observing precepts like this. Now, in this lesson, we are going to pay attention for the resultants mainly, vipaka. Seeing, listening, smelling, tasting, feeling the touching. Those are vipaka or resultants according to the Abhidhamma or the philosophy, or the psychology, the Buddhism. What happens? What are the conditions to see visible object? There are 4 conditions should be fulfilled to see. What are them? We should have eye. Here actually eye means eye sensitivity. When you learn the matters in the chapter 6, Rupa chapter, you will learn about those matters in detail. Therefore, don't worry about these matters, just know in brief. So there are 4 conditions should be fulfilled to see. What are them? Number 1, eye. You should have eye. Blind person can't see. And there should be a visible object. If you close your eyes, you can't see. Therefore, there should be a visible object. And there should be light. When you're in a dark room, you can't see. Therefore, light is another factor. The last one, attention. You should have attention. Just keep in your mind as attention in the beginning. Here, ultimately, we call the mental factor manasikara. We will learn this mental factor in the chapter 2, when we will learn mental factors. Here, just know that attention. So there are 4 conditions should be fulfilled to see: eye, visible object, light, attention. When those factors come together, we can see the visible object. So this seeing function is called as eye consciousness in Abhidhamma. This is your life. Just understand. Don't be afraid about the Pali terms. Think what happens in your life. When you are seeing something, that means eye consciousness arises due to the combination of these 4 factors. Combination of eye, visible object, light, and attention you can see. Seeing means eye consciousness arises. So there is no person or being seeing, just eye consciousness. The mere eye consciousness arises. So while we are learning Abhidhamma, we should pay attention for our insight practice. While we are learning, this is not for only learning. This is for our insight practice as well. Then shall we move into the listening. 4 conditions should be fulfilled for hearing also. You should have an eye, and there should be an object, that is sound, and there should be a space and attention. Deaf people cannot listen because they do not have eye sensitivity. Similarly, there are 4 conditions for hearing. There should be eye, that's the eye sensitivity, not this appearance of eye. Eye sensitivity and object, sound. The 3rd factor, space. The 4th factor, attention. There should be 4 conditions should fulfill to listen. So deaf person cannot listen because they do not have eye sensitivity. Without sound, without striking the object, the sound object, we can't hear. And another condition, there should be a space. We can't listen in the vacuum. And the common condition for all, attention, manasikara. Pay attention for the smelling. We should have a nose. Here, nose means not just the appearance of the nose. Nose means the nose sensitivity. Next one, object. There should be odor or smell. 3rd factor, that's air. The smell should come through air, and smell should impinge or strike with our nose sensitivity or nose base. And there should be attention to arise nose consciousness or ghana vijnana. Let's repeat again. 4 conditions should be come together to fulfill the smelling. Nose means nose sensitivity, smell, object, air, and attention. So similarly, 4 conditions should be come together to fulfill the consciousness of tongue or tongue consciousness, or in simple, we call to taste. We should have a tongue. Here, tongue means the tongue sensitivity. In the chapter 6, you will learn about these sensitivities, these bases in detail. Just think about just tongue sensitivity. And there should be object. That object is food. And there should be moisture or liquid. When you put something into your mouth, it mix with the saliva, water, or whatever liquid. After mixing with the moisture or liquid, you will feel the taste. The last factor should be come together, that's attention. So there are 4 conditions should be fulfilled to complete your tongue consciousness. That's tongue, food, moisture or liquid. The last one, attention. After combination of these four factors, you feel the taste of the food. Next one, body consciousness. When you feel whether pain or pleasant feeling or softness or hardness, four conditions come together. What are the four conditions? Body. Here actually body means not this appearance. Body means body sensitivity. We can't find body sensitivity in our nail and hair, and also we call dry, dead skin. Except those places, inside and outside, there is a body sensitivity. So here in shortly we call body, but ultimately that's body sensitivity. Next one, tangible objects. Here tangible objects we call pottabba in Pali. There are three matters: earth element, heat element, and air element. In Pali, Pathavi Dhatu, Tejo Dhatu, and Vayo Dhatu. Earth element, heat element, and air element. And third factor, earth or solidity. There should be a earth or solidity, Pathavi Dhatu, to impinge that object, tangible objects, that strike on that earth or earth element. Next one, similarly, attention. So, four conditions should come together to feel touching. Body means body sensitivity, tangible object, earth element, heat element, or air element, earth or solidity. Number four, attention. Combination of these four factors, you feel the touching with a pleasant feeling or painful feeling. Now we pay attention for the names. In this lecture, don't worry about the matters that you have learned in the beginning. In this lecture, I expect to learn these 18 rootless consciousness. You will learn about the matters and the karma and the thought process in next lessons. Also, I will explain the cognitive process or mind flow in brief in this lecture. Don't worry about those things. In this lecture, you should learn mainly through 18 rootless consciousness: Akusala Vipaka, Kusala Vipaka, and Ahetuka Kriya. So there are 7 Akusala Vipaka Citta. Just keep the name in your mind. After learning the cognitive process or mind flow in brief, you will get an idea. So we call, when we are seeing something, that is eye consciousness. When we see desirable object, that's resultant of wholesome. When we see undesirable object, that's resultant of unwholesome, akusala. That's why we call akusala vipaka. So when we see undesirable object, akusala vipaka, chakku viññāna arise. eye consciousness, unwholesome resultant of arise. We translate, according to Pali, eye consciousness accompanied by neutral feeling. Those who know Pali, Pekka Sahagatam Chakku Vijnana. So when we see undesirable object, resultant consciousness, unwholesome resultant consciousness arise. That's unwholesome resultant eye consciousness. Upekka Sahagata Chakku Vijnana. When we listen undesirable sound, when we hear undesirable sound, Upekka Sahagata Akusala Vipaka Chakku Vijnana arise. Unwholesome resultant eye consciousness arise. In Pali, Upekka Sahagatam Sota Vijnanam, ear consciousness accompanied by neutral feeling. When you feel undesirable smell, unwholesome resultant nose consciousness arise. In Pali, Upekka Sahagatam Ghana Vijnanam, nose consciousness accompanied by neutral feeling. Upekka Sahagatam Ghana Vijnanam. When you eat something, for example, bitter food, at that time, that's not a desirable object. At that time, unwholesome resultant tongue consciousness arise. In Pali, Pekka Sahagatam Juha Vijnana. Tongue consciousness accompanied by neutral feeling. When you feel the pain in your body, at that time, body consciousness, the unwholesome resultant body consciousness arise. When you hurt with a stone or cut your finger, that's painful feeling. At that time, unwholesome resultant body consciousness arise. That's not a pleasant feeling. That's unpleasant feeling. Therefore, we call dukkha sahagata. Not upekka, not somanasa. That's dukkha sahagata. Body consciousness accompanied by painful feeling. These five consciousnesses are obvious for us, as we discussed, but remaining two are not obvious. After we learning the mind flow or cognitive process, you will get an idea about these two consciousnesses. What are they? The receiving consciousness and investigating consciousness. Receiving consciousness in Pali, sampatichana citta. Investigating consciousness in Pali, santirana citta. So they both are also with neutral feeling. Upekka sahagatam sampatichana citta. The receiving consciousness accompanied by neutral feeling. The last one, number 7, Upekka sahagatam santirana cittam. Investigating consciousness accompanied by neutral feeling. Let's move into the wholesome resultant consciousness. There are 8 wholesome resultant consciousness. Rootless, wholesome resultant consciousness. There are 8. In Pali, Ahetuka Cittāni Citta. When you see something desirable object, that's very beautiful. When you see some beautiful scene or whatever beautiful object, that time, wholesome resultant consciousness, wholesome, resultant I consciousness arise. Upekha sahagatam kusala vipakam chakku viññāna. Here, as I mentioned before, pay attention for the rootless, because last week we learned rooted, wholesome, resultant conscious. There are also 8. Here also 8. When we see some desirable object, good, beautiful object, at that time, wholesome, resultant, I consciousness arise. In Pali, upekka sahagatam chakku viññāna. I consciousness accompanied by neutral feeling. Number 2, when you listen, good sound, very pleasant sound, at that time, wholesome, resultant, ear consciousness arise. Ear consciousness accompanied by neutral feeling. In Pali, upekka sahagatam sota viññāna. Ear consciousness accompanied by neutral feeling. When you smell, pleasant smell, odor, like a perfume, at that time, wholesome, resultant, nose consciousness arise. That's also with neutral feeling. Nose consciousness accompanied by neutral feeling. Upekka sahagatam ghana viññānam. When you eat delicious food, at that time, wholesome, resultant, tongue consciousness arise. That's also accompanied by neutral feeling. Tongue consciousness accompanied by neutral feeling. In Pali, upekka sahagatam jivha viññāna. Tongue consciousness accompanied by neutral feeling. When you feel pleasure in your body, very soft, pleasurable feeling. When you feel the softness, or when you feel pleasurable feeling in your body, at that time, wholesome, resultant, body consciousness arise. Body consciousness accompanied by here, not the neutral feeling, that's pleasurable feeling. In Pali, sukha sahagata. Sukha sahagatam kaya viññāna. Body consciousness accompanied by pleasurable feeling. Again, sukha sahagatam kaya viññānam. Body consciousness accompanied by pleasurable feeling. Next one, also receiving consciousness and investigating consciousness. In akusala vipaka, there are one receiving consciousness and one investigating consciousness. But in wholesome resultants, there are one receiving and 2 investigating consciousness. Later on, you will learn what is the reason. So, the receiving consciousness accompanied by neutral feeling. In Pali, upekka sahagatam sampatichchana cittam. Receiving consciousness accompanied by neutral feeling. Next one, investigating consciousness accompanied by pleasurable feeling. Somanassa sahagatam samtirana cittam. Here, the extra one is somanassa, comparing with kusala vipaka. The last one, investigating consciousness accompanied by neutral feeling. Upekka sahagatam samtirana cittam. Investigating consciousness accompanied by neutral feeling. So there are altogether 8 rootless, wholesome, resultant consciousness. So there are altogether how many resultant rootless consciousness? 7 plus 8, altogether 15 rootless, resultant consciousness. Now we are going to learn rootless functional consciousness. There are 3 rootless functional consciousness. In Pali, Ahetuka Citta, Pekka Sahagatan, Panchadvara Vajjana Chitta. Phyto-adverting consciousness accompanied by neutral feeling. These are also the names. After you learning the cognitive process, mind flow, you will get an idea. Just pay attention for the name. Phyto-adverting consciousness accompanied by neutral feeling. In Pali, Upekka Sahagatam Panchadvara Vajjana Chittam. Next one, mind-adverting consciousness accompanied by neutral feeling. Upekka Sahagatam Manodvara Vajjana Chittam. These 2 consciousness are not obvious. After learning the mind flow, you will get an idea. Then this is only for the Arahants. Smile producing consciousness accompanied by pleasurable feeling. Somanassa. In Pali, Somanassa Sahagatam Hasituppada Chitta. Hasita means smile in Pali. Uppada means produce or arise. So this smile producing consciousness only arises for Arahants. Eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, and body consciousness are obvious for us. Now we pay attention to understand receiving consciousness, investigating consciousness, and adverting consciousness. Dhammasangani commentary gives a couple of similes to explain this thought process. Abhidhamma scholars almost use the simile of mango tree, simile of eating a mango. Also, Chandamila Mahathera, also Ilananda Mahathera, Fiado, many other Abhidhamma scholars use the mango simile. Yeah, I also use this simile to explain the thought process. The simile of eating mango. Suppose, so first we have to know the story. After this learning the story, we divide this story into steps and we compare with the chittas, with the consciousness. It's a nice story. A man is sleeping with his head covered under the foot of the mango tree. Now, you can imagine, now man is sleeping under the mango tree. There are many mangoes ripen in mango tree. But he's in the sleep. What happens next? Then one ripened fruit fell down. After that, he woke up and turn his body and open his eyes and looked what happened. At that time, he could see there was a mango, ripened mango fruit. After that, he stretched his hand and took mango with his hand. He received the mango fruit. After that, he squeezed squeeze the mango fruit to know whether it was ripened or not. To confirm again, to make it sure, again he smelled the fruit to confirm whether this mango fruit is ripened or not. Then he confirmed that it's ripened well. After that, he cut or he eat the mango fruit. That's very delicious. After eating, there are some particles on his lips. Then he licks his lips and swallow the small particles. This is the story. Now we will compare these incidents with consciousness. Sometimes you will get new terms or new words here. Don't worry about it. Just try to get an idea how thought process arises in your life. Last week we learned about rebirth consciousness. When we are sleeping, that rebirth consciousness arises again and again without seeing dreams. When we are in deep sleep, those type of vipaka citta, the same type of rebirth consciousness arise. So we call this citta bhavanga citta in Pali. In English, life continuum consciousness. So here sleeping is compared with life continuum consciousness. Without having those eye consciousness, ear, nose, tongue, body consciousness, and also greed, hatred, delusion, or wholesome consciousness, the life continuum consciousness arises again and again as a flow. Therefore, we call this citta to life continuum, continue in the life. The bhava anga, bhava means life, anga is a part, life continuum consciousness. So our bhavanga citta arises again and again as a flow, without having those 5 types of vijnana or javana citta, somano vijnana. Then what happened? Mango fell down. It strikes his ear. That means striking with the external object. That's like regarding eye consciousness, that's like a striking with visible object. Because of that striking, we call our life continuum consciousness shakes. Shakes means in Pali, we call chalana. In thought process, we name this citta to bhavanga chalana. Don't worry about these names, just to get an idea. The next one, he woke up. Woke up means stop. Stop the life continuum. The stop we call in Pali bhavanga upachcheda. Upachcheda. Bhavanga citta is life continuum consciousness. Therefore, in thought process, we call bhavanga upachcheda. Stopping the flow of life continuum consciousness. So he seems to be quite lazy, but he wanted to know what happens. Then he turned his body. Turning is like fido-adverting consciousness. Now we pay attention to this fido-adverting consciousness. Suppose you are in a junction. There are 6 roads. One road is we call visible object. Second thought, sound. Third one, smell. Fourth one, taste. Fifth one, tangible object. Sixth one, the remaining objects. You will learn about the objects in detail, just simply to understand this phyto-adverting consciousness. When it strikes visible object, the thought process turn towards eye consciousness. You turn your vehicle to the road we call eye consciousness or eye door. If object is sound, turn the thought process towards ear door or ear road. If object is smell, you turn your consciousness towards, if its object is sound, the consciousness turn the flow towards ear consciousness or ear door. If object is smell, it turns towards smell consciousness or the nose door. If it's taste, consciousness turn the flow towards the tongue door or tongue door consciousness, tongue consciousness. If it's tangible object, whether element, the hardness or softness, earth element, heat or cold, heat element, air, it adverts towards body or body consciousness. Other than those objects, this is in simply, you will learn in detail later. For other consciousness, phyto-adverting consciousness cannot turn because there is another person to advert. That's we call manodvara in Kriya Chitta. You can remember mind-adverting consciousness. For the remaining objects, mind-adverting consciousness turn towards manodvara or mind towards other consciousness such as greed-rooted, hatred-rooted, or delusion-rooted, wholesome, mahakusala, or mahakiriya. So here, the function of phyto-adverting consciousness is to turn the mind flow, thought flow towards that relevant door, towards that relevant consciousness among five. This is the function of phyto-adverting consciousness. Now I think you can get an idea about phyto-adverting consciousness, Panchadvara Vajjana Chitta. Then he opened his eyes and looked at the mango. This is the time he can look, he can see the object. That's the time of seeing. So therefore we call arising of eye consciousness. Then he stretched his hand and took the mango in his hand. That's like receiving consciousness. As we discussed previously, this thought process arises rapidly. It's difficult, even only the Buddha can identify these thought process one by one chitta by one chitta, after moment to moment. So we can understand with these similes. Then he stretched out his hand and took the mango in his hand. That's like a receiving consciousness. Then what happened? He squeezed and checked it, whether ripen or not. That's like a investigating. Therefore, we call investigating consciousness, Santirana Chitta. Then he smelled fruit. and decided, confirmed, ripened. He determined that's ripened. That's determining consciousness. In this determining consciousness means also manodvara vajjana, but here we call it determine. In Pali we call vatthabhana, vavathapeti. So there are two functions for the manodvara vajjana. In Fido, it works as determining. In Mindo thought process, it's a Mindo adverting consciousness. Next, what happened? He ate it. While eating, he know the taste. He couldn't feel the taste while seeing or receiving or investigating or determining. While he was eating, he could enjoy that taste. He know the object very well. That we call Javana Chitta. Later on we will learn what are the Javana Chittas. Just keep on the Chittas that have the strong force. We call double force, like Lobhamula Chitta, Dosamula Chitta, Mohamula Chitta, Mahakusala, Mahakiriya, greed-rooted consciousness, hatred-rooted consciousness, Mahakusala Chitta, sense sphere wholesome consciousness. So those Chittas have the double force we call. Therefore we call Javana Chitta. So it can know the object very well. Then what happens? He licked and swallowed the tiny particles. It's like then he went to sleep. It's like a knowing object again. We call in Pali Tadarammana consciousness. Just get an idea about this thought process. Don't worry about this thought process. You will learn about thought process in chapter 4 in detail. Just to get an idea about this resultant consciousness, how those resultant consciousness arise in the thought process. So just there are some questions arising in you. There will be no question and answer session today. Just try to answers for some questions. So why Kaya Vijnana with pain and pleasure and Sukha and Dukkha? You have seen eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, and tongue consciousness with Upekha Vedana, neutral feeling. But for the body consciousness, Kaya Vijnana, for Akusala, that's painful, Dukkha Sagata. For Kusala Vipaka, that's pleasurable feeling, Sukha Sagata. What is the reason? Pay attention for the base or sensitivity and the object. In the classification of matter, we classify the matters into two groups, Mahabhuta and Upadaya Rupa. The great matters and dependent matters. What are the objects of Kaya Vijnana? The great element. Only, actually not the four, actually there are three. Objects are three, one of three. Patavi, Tejo, or Vayu. Earth element, hardness or softness. Heat element, heat or cold, Tejo, air element. So those objects are gross. Those are great elements. Therefore, it's like a simile given in when you put the cotton ball on the table and you hit with a hammer. What happens? The hammer hits the table. It's a gross striking. But when you strike, when you hit cotton ball to cotton ball, it's very soft striking, like eye sensitivity and visible object. Those sensitivity and the objects are very subtle. Therefore, only upekka sahagata, neutral feeling arises. Next one, why to investigate in minds in wholesome, rootless resultant? Sampirana. In Abhidhamma, as we discussed, objects are classified into desirable objects and undesirable objects. Abhidhamma mentioned that there are two types of desirable objects. One is the ordinary desirable object. Another one is very desirable object. For very desirable objects, somanasa sahagata santirana chitta arises. For ordinary desirable objects, upekka sahagata santirana chitta arises. But regarding undesirable objects, we can't classify very undesirable or undesirable. That's only desirable. That's only undesirable objects. There are no two types. There are only one type for undesirable objects. Therefore, in akusala vipaka, there are only one santirana, that's upekka sahagata santirana chitta. As we discussed also, mind-adverting consciousness has two functions, that's mind-adverting function and determining function. When we determine with 5 objects, visible object, sound, smell, taste, and tangible objects. For the remaining objects, it works as the function is adverting towards mind. So these are the two functions for manodvara vajjana. So there I want to answer for one more question again. So last week there was a question about the resultant consciousness. One participant asked question that what are the results, what are the originations? After this lesson, I think it's clear for you. So there are unwholesome resultant consciousness. Unwholesome resultant means not unwholesome. The resultant of the unwholesome consciousness. And there are wholesome resultant consciousness. Wholesome resultant consciousness means not wholesome. They are the resultant of the wholesome consciousness. Now I will give the answer. So what are the originations of these unwholesome and the wholesome resultant consciousness? So there are 7 unwholesome resultant consciousness, 7 akusala vipaka chitta. What are the originations? Originations are 12 akusala chitta. So those 12 akusala chittas give the result as unwholesome resultant. We call akusala vipaka. So what is the origination? Origination is unwholesome, 12 unwholesome consciousness. Akusala chitta. What is the result? What are the results? Unwholesome resultant consciousness. So this is the karma and vipaka. Karma and its results. So last week we learned Mahakusala, sense sphere, beautiful, wholesome consciousness. Those are the karma. Those are the action. So what are the results? So there are two types of results. Last week we have learned Mahavipaka, sense sphere, beautiful, resultant consciousness. How many? Altogether there are 8. So Manasa Sahagata, Upekka Sahagata, 4 and 4, Jnana Sampayutta, Jnana Vipayutta, 4 and 4, Sankarika, Sankarika, 4. Altogether there are 8 Mahavipaka Chitta. Here, how many rootless, wholesome resultant consciousness? There are 8 rootless, wholesome resultant consciousness. Ahetuka Cittāni. So altogether, how many? 8 plus 8, altogether 16 wholesome resultant consciousness. 8 are rooted, the 8 are rootless. Altogether, there are 16 wholesome resultant consciousness. 8 rooted, 8 rootless. So what are the originations? Originations are karma, or the actions are 8 beautiful sense sphere wholesome consciousness. Mahakusala. Mahakusala is the action. Vipaka, 16 Vipaka are the results. I think you can get an idea about the action and its results. So there is another classification about superior consciousness and inferior. We will learn about those superior and inferior later. I think now you can get an idea about action and its results. Let's conclude. Shall we give our thanks to those who organized and managed, negotiated this class on time and with much effort. Also, who are involved with live streaming and making the flyers and other things. So with the technical support. So shall we thanks for all of them who supported to complete our Abhidhamma class. So shall we share the merits to deities and all the beings. Akasattha ca bhummattha devanaga mahiddhika punyantang anumoditva chiran rakkhantu sasanam. Akasattha ca bhummattha devanaga mahiddhika punyantang anumoditva chiran rakkhantu desanam. Akasattha ca bhummattha devanaga mahiddhika punyantang anumoditva chiran rakkhantu savakam chiran rakkhantu mamparang. Buddha sasanam chiran tiṭṭhatu, Buddha sasanam chiran tiṭṭhatu, Buddha sasanam chiran tiṭṭhatu. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.